All righty. Welcome to tonight's Community Preservation Committee meeting, virtual meeting through Comcast Cable Channel 18 in Fall River. You can follow by the following Fall River Government Television at WWFRG-TV, Facebook Live, or you can live stream. In case of meeting conflicts, view on Channel 9. Pursuant to the open meeting laws, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived, by those present and deemed acknowledged and permissible. Can I start with roll call? John Ferrer?
Here.
Paul Machado?
Present.
Chris Oliveira?
Here.
Alex Sylvia?
Here.
Carolyn Auburn?
Here.
John Ferreira? Oh, I
Here.
already said you twice. Richard Colden?
Here.
Jay Burns?
Here.
So tonight on Zoom meeting is John Brandt, John Ferrer, Paul Machado, Chris Oliveira, Alex Sylvia, Carolyn Auburn, Richard Colden, Jay Burns, and we're missing Victor Ferris from the Park Board, and we also have Sandy Dennis, administrative aide to the Community Preservation. Do we have any citizen input tonight? Sandy?
No citizen input tonight.
Okay. Can I have a motion for approval of the minutes from February 10th, 2022?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from February 10th, 2022.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call vote on that. John?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yeah.
Richard?
Yes.
And Jay, you were missing, so John Brandt, yes. Okay, minutes approved. Then we'll move on to the funding hearing.
John,
Yes.
can I make a motion to take one of them out of order?
Sure.
Okay. Is it possible to move up the restoration for St. Anne's Church first? Because I know that one of the people that are presenting has a conflict tonight, so it would be helpful to move that up first.
Can we have a second on that?
I'll second that.
Okay, roll call vote on that. John?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
All righty. So first on the agenda is the historic St. Anne's Church exterior restoration, historic for $150,000. I think we have Brad Paul here tonight. It's located on South Main Street. Paul, would you like to tell us a little about this project?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, thank you. And thanks for accommodating my schedule. I was the primary author for the application. I believe we're joined by Mr. Robert Gauvin, who's the Preservation Society's financial secretary. The St. Anne's Preservation Society, a 501c3 nonprofit, is the applicant. Just as a way of background, I was born and raised in Fall River and Swansea. And as a kid, I remember driving across the Braga Bridge with my family from Somerset to Fall River. And my visual impression of Fall River was framed by, on the left, the towers of Notre Dame before it burned in the 80s. Just to the left of the bridge, you had the old Durfee High School. And then you had the smokestacks of downtown, and to the right, the two towers of St. Anne's. That to me said Fall River. And I think you know that, let me just finish and say that I moved to San Francisco after college, but my whole family still lives in Fall River, Somerset, and Swansea. And I get back there very often. And I also, in the 1970s and 80s, worked for the National Trust for Historic Preservation in their San Francisco office for a number of years. And I've been involved in historic preservation projects since then. I think, as you know, St. Anne's was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in Washington, D.C. in 1983. And there's a quote from the application I'd just like to briefly cite. It says, quote, magnificently located facing Kennedy Park, St. Anne's stands proudly as a masterpiece of architecture and a lasting tribute to generations of immigrants from French Canada who built it, end of quote. And St. Anne's is also, as you know, on the State Register of Historic Places. Repairing and restoring the exterior of the church, primarily the slate roof, is what we're talking about, because right now leaks are compromising the structural integrity of the building, and if not fixed soon, could threaten its future. And in proceeding with this, we have three goals. First is to preserve one of Fall River's most architecturally and historically significant buildings, one that's been a source of pride for the city since it opened 107 years ago. Second, we want to recognize the contributions of generations of hardworking French-Canadian families and mill workers, immigrants who not only built St. Anne's themselves, but also contributed to the rapid rise of Fall River as an economic and industrial powerhouse in the early 20th century. And finally, we believe that preserving St. Anne's will contribute to Fall River's economic recovery by attracting thousands of visitors each year to St. Anne's, people who spend money in nearby restaurants, hotels, stores, and places like Battleship Cove, the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast, the Fall River Historical Society, and Narrow Center for the Arts. One of the questions in the application has to do with community support, and I'd like to address that. Since St. Anne's reopened, hundreds of local volunteers have staffed the shrine. Before COVID, it was 7 days a week. They've held fundraisers, mopped up after floods, designed brochures, and a capital campaign, and they have donated over $300,000 since then to preserve this unique landmark that means so much to so many people in Fall River. And it means that regardless of their religion or lack of it, the neighborhood they grew up in, or their political affiliation, this is a project that really brings the people of Fall River together. You may have read in 2018, CNN came to Fall River to do a story at the Misum restaurant on the history of the Fall River chow mein sandwich. And hopefully a few of you saw that. The owner of Misum offered to donate all the proceeds from the sale of sandwiches that day to St. Anne's in the efforts to restore it. When CNN's crew finished the story, they stayed and volunteered for hours. And one day we raised $10,000. That's the kind of heartfelt support St. Anne's has generated since the outset. In terms of the budget, it's $935,000, and that includes the required 10% reserve. To date, St. Anne's Preservation Society itself has pledged $150,000. We've been invited to apply in about 2 weeks for a $250,000 grant from the National Sacred Places Fund of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And we are hoping for a $150,000 capital CPA grant from Fall River. These sources alone together would total $550,000 of the $935,000 we need. The remaining money would come from local individuals, families, and businesses that have already contributed over $300,000 to St. Anne's, as well as going to larger donors from Greater Boston, from Northern California, and elsewhere. St. Anne's Preservation Society has been responsible for the maintenance and operations of the building since signing a 10-year lease with the diocese in 2018. On average, we raise about $12,000 a month from the sale of candles, from gift shop sales, on-site donations, and fundraisers like the one I just mentioned. It costs us about $5,000 a month to cover the ongoing operating costs, and the routine maintenance costs. Finally, you should have a letter dated January 14th in your packet from the Diocese of Fall River, the owners of the building, expressing their support for our application and their willingness to enter into a facade easement recorded with the city if we get this grant. That concludes my presentation. I believe Mr. Gobbin is with us, but he and I are here to answer any questions you might have.
It is nice to see that out of the 935, you only need 150 from us. We always like to see that, other grants and donations coming in. And you're replacing with a slate roof, right?
Yes, the way it works is you basically take the existing slate roof. It turns out it's in much better shape than we thought. So you remove it, and where the valleys come together from two sides of the sloping roof is where most of the damage is. So you go inside there and repair the woodwork that's been damaged. You replace a new moisture barrier, and you put the original slate back up there. So we're not changing materials, which if you're familiar with the Secretary of Interior's standards for historic preservation, that's one of their key findings. Whenever you can, use the original material, replace it with the original, take it off, repair it, and put it back. is what
Good.
I'd like to see.
If any of the board members have a question, just raise your hand and I'll call on you. John?
Just a quick question. As part of the repair on the valleys, isn't that a copper flashing that's on top of the vapor barrier usually than the slate?
I believe so, unless there's some other materials. You won't see it from once it's done. So I think copper is what they used to use. I don't know if that's what they still suggest or if there's some better material now. But that's my understanding. When I've seen copper roofs, when I've seen slate roofs taken off, there's often that green copper
Correct.
in those places along the V there, the valley.
Anyone else, any questions? Alex?
Hello. I see that in the funding section of your application that you're anticipating on raising around $300,000 to complete the roof project. Is that correct?
I mean, in addition to the three grants,
Yeah.
between the money from the Preservation Society, from the CPA grant from Fall River, and from the national grant. That's correct.
Okay. And it says for your timeline that you're hoping to begin this fall 2022. Is that also still correct?
Actually, the capital campaign, sort of the local part of the capital campaign, is going to begin very soon. There's a brand new brochure that's just been designed. But in terms of the funding that comes from not only the CPA funds from Fall River, but also the national funds, we can't spend the money or begin the work until the grants have been approved. So we're going to have about a 6-month campaign and hopefully have all the money we need by the time we sign agreements for the CPA grant and for the national grant.
Okay, because I was just wondering how the timing would work, because for our grants, you can't start the work until the grant is awarded and finalized. So I was just wondering how your timing would work with the fundraising and when you anticipated.
Well, the rule that you have is the same one the national fund has. You cannot spend any money. So we have scheduled it so we're going to do the bulk of the fundraising between now and that point in time. So when the national grant gives you half the money up front and half the money when you're done. So we're going to have to time it so that we have more than just the grants to get started.
Okay. And for I seen the diocese letter of support that they say they're willing to consider the facade easement. I just wanted to point out that it is a requirement, so it has to be a little bit more than willing if the grant was awarded. And I was just wondering what their understanding was on how long that would be and what they were willing to accept.
I wrote a 1.5-page memo to them on what a facade easement involves and what it doesn't involve, that it's really about the exterior of the church. It's about preserving it so that people that put money into it, that the building wouldn't be torn down in 10 years for a parking lot or radically changed. They understood that. I explained to them that it doesn't have anything to do with what happens on the interior of the church, because that's not covered by this grant or the national grant. And what they said is they're willing to do it if we get the grant. They don't want to spend a lot of time and have their lawyers draw things up unless they know we're going to get the grant.
And what did they say, what range time-wise they were willing to accept? Traditionally, I think we've gone with 30-year restrictions. That was
the number I used. I said at least 30 years.
Okay. Because I know before your organization was formed, when there was kind of speculation about the fate of St. Anne's Church, a lot of people were worried about its potential destruction. So I was just wondering what the diocese thoughts were, 30 years out, if they were willing to do that easement. But it sounds like they understand the 30 years is what we'd be aiming for.
And part of it is they understand that if we do this quality restoration of the exterior of the building, particularly the roof, the building will stand for another 30 to 50 years without any more investment in that. So I think that gives them the comfort to be able to do that. Okay. They wouldn't be called on 10 years from now to spend another $250,000 or $500,000 on the building. Once we complete this work, the exterior of the building will be in really good shape for quite a while to come.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Paul?
Thank you. Mr. Paul, I want to ask a couple of questions so that the record is clear.
Sure.
Your organization has a 10-year lease?
Yes.
Okay, what does that mean?
When they met with the bishop initially, I think at the end of 2017, they proposed taking over the running and operating of it and the cost of the church to maintain it in perpetuity. He didn't know whether they're going to be able to succeed or not, but he believed they were both sincere and they were well-intentioned and they had a good chance of doing that. So he said, to begin with, I'll give you a 10-year lease to see if you can do it. My understanding is that if we're successful, that lease could get extended without much trouble, because from their point of view, as the owner, you've got somebody who's willing to operate it, cover the operating costs, do all the restoration work. It's a win-win for the property owner's point of view.
Okay, during that period of time, are there going to be any masses held at the church?
They have occasionally masses now. In order to maintain it as a church, I believe there have to be 2 a year. But the church was open pre-COVID 7 days a week, and people go in and out of there all the time. And I just have to say, my father grew up in Corky Row, and I spent a lot of time in Corky Row, and I went into the church. I'm not myself Catholic. I just believe it's a beautiful building. It needs to be preserved. But I used to work in the Tenderloin in San Francisco, which is like, imagine the Corky Row today, 10 times bigger and 5 times worse. And that's what the Tenderloin was like. And I worked there day in and day out to make it a better neighborhood. And I lived in the neighborhood. And there were times when I was at my wit's end, just physically, emotionally, whatever. And I would go to a church around the corner, St. Boniface Church. And I would sit in the quiet in that church. It was just a beautiful space. It was very quiet. And I recharged my batteries. It wasn't a religious thing. It was just a beautiful place to sit in the quiet. And I know people who are not Catholic who go into St. Anne's all the time. For that, they just like to experience the beauty of the architecture. And I think that's the interior of the church. Again, what we're talking about is preserving the exterior, which is something that every person who lives in the city of Fall River and everyone who drives by or passes by gets to enjoy. You don't have to be in the church to enjoy the architecture and history of it.
There's also an indication that you talked about the number of tourists that this building attracts. Could you explain that more?
Sure. There was a study done. There's been a number of studies done about tourism and why people come different places. And as people learn about St. Anne's and hear about it, you may have seen the story in the Boston Globe about 2 years ago about the effort of residents of the city to preserve it and all the work that went into it. And it's inspired people in San Francisco, where there was a church that had been closed, and they went to the archdiocese and made a similar proposal. And they're waiting to hear back on that. So I think people love the architecture of St. Anne's. It's a part of the history of the city, of how the city was built by immigrants from surrounding neighborhoods. And people go on tours all the time. I do it in cities whenever I go on a tour of the major landmarks downtown. St. Anne's is one of them. The Academy building in downtown is another one. And so as people walk around, they get thirsty, they get hungry, they see something in a store window, a sweater that they like, and they spend money. And usually if they're coming someplace for a couple of days, hopefully people will come down for a tour of the city, for a show at the Narrow Center for the Arts, maybe a tour of Battleship Cove, and they'll be spending nights in either a hotel or an Airbnb and spending money in Fall River, and that money will circulate and benefit the city.
Okay, and when was the church built?
It was actually built between, I believe it's 1893 and 1905. It was built over time. The residents of the community and the members of the parish would put together as much money as they could, and they'd build as much until they ran out of money. They'd raise money more, and they'd build it. And actually, the French-Canadian immigrants were, a number of the people who built the church were the French-Canadian immigrants who lived in the neighborhood or went to the church.
Okay, and do you know of, any historic connections about who attended? Were there any significant events held at the church that were historically significant?
I don't personally, but if you go on the St. Anne's Preservation Society website, they have an incredible 8-part history of the neighborhood and the church. And I wish I could remember the names in there, but it's a very interesting history, not just of St. Anne's, but the neighborhood around it and how the city developed during that period of time. And I would recommend anyone going on. It's on the St. Anne's Preservation Society website, and I think it's up to 8 chapters now. I just read the first 7 a little while ago. The other thing that people have told me, and I've heard this from a number of people, is that ever since the building was built, those towers, it's one of the highest points in Fall River, and the tops of those towers, I believe, are 160 feet high. People in the on the Taunton River and in Mount Hope Bay have used it as a navigation aid. And the most recent story I heard is that when helicopters are medevacing patients to St. Anne's Hospital, their approach is they kind of fly in toward a point between the two steeples, go just over that, and then drop into Kennedy Park so that they can come out and take people out of the helicopters and take them to the hospital. So it's been a major navigational aid for both water and air for a while now.
Yeah, can anybody hear me? This is Bob Garvin.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, one historic thing that happened was in 1911 when I believe it was President Taft visited for the Cotton Centennial. President Taft was on the steps of St. Anne's at the beginning of the parade. When that happened. So, President Taft was, because if you look at the stairs in front, it's a great stage for, having a lot of people. And so I believe there's pictures of President Taft there on the stairs of St. Anne's.
Any further questions?
I just want to make a comment. I asked those questions because because of the Mass Supreme Judicial Court's decision in the Acton case. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to make sure that we considered factors that the court has found appropriate in CPA funding of religious structures. I think it would make good sense for us to maybe download the website materials about the history and have that as part of our documentation.
Okay, it's a good idea.
And I think you raised a good question about the different court cases. I checked the CPA website, and there are a number of churches in the Commonwealth. I think the biggest one, or the biggest grant, was, I believe it was Newton Center. There's an Episcopal church where they gave them like $1.1 million, $1.2 million. And the way I understand how it's worked out over time is, as long as it's a part of the church that's only the exterior, it's visible to everyone in the community, that's part of the history of the community, you don't have a problem. It's when you cannot fund restoration of the interior of an active church. You just can't do that. But if it's just the exterior and it's an historic and architectural landmark, that seems to be the threshold that people look at.
There are a number of grants that have been made to religious buildings, but you also know that there was litigation involving one funding amount to the church in Acton, and that resulted in the SJC decision, and they provide some guidance about what is necessary or appropriate for the CPA to consider. And that's why I asked the questions about the history, the navigational tools, etc.
Yeah, I just want to add, there's also a food pantry here. So every Saturday morning from 10 to 12, people line up and they give them, bread and cereal and, canned goods and things like that. So that happens every single week.
How many people do you have come to the food pantry?
It's usually 30 or 50.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
You said it's normally 30 to 50 people that go to the food pantry.
Thank you. What is the rectory used for?
The rectory is not part of this. It's actually a residence for, all the rectory was another nonprofit took it over, and they have low-income housing there and things like that. And it was redone for housing, so it's really a housing unit, and it's really has nothing to do with us anymore. It's just right next door.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other further questions? All right. Well, Brad and Bob, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
All righty. Thanks. Let's see. Next on the agenda, we're back to Fall River Fire Museum, repair items required to open to the general public. They're looking for historic for $391,690. I think Mike
John.
LePage is here.
John, we have to make a motion to go back to the original agenda.
Oh, okay. Can I have a motion to go back to the original
I'll
agenda?
make the motion to go back to the original agenda and start with number one, the way we have it listed.
Okay. Can I have a second on that?
Okay.
We get a second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote. John,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Caroline,
Yeah.
Richard,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
John, yes. Okay, so we go back to the original agenda, which was the Fall River Fire Museum repair items required to open to the general public. It was $391,690. We have Michael LePage here, and that's on located on North Main Street. Mike, you want to tell us a little about your project?
Sure. Good evening, CPC members. Appreciate you taking the time to listen. Also, I believe Mike Keene, the architect, is also with us. So I prepared this application hoping that we'll finally get this project open. We looked at it in terms of what the museum's needs are to directly impact the opening of the Fire Museum. And as you see in my application, we have secured other funding and other projects through the years. We've come a long way and we're pretty close now. But one of the biggest hindrances right now is the windows. Sort of working from the top down with a new roof, and then the brickwork was done and now the windows need to be done. And I kind of split the project up into two pieces. Windows that directly impact the Fire Museum, and then the windows that are the remaining windows that wrap the building. And the other tenant, if you're aware, is the Fall River Animal Control. They occupy the first floor on the police side, the former police substation side. So obviously it's my hope to get the full funding, but if money is not going to allow that to happen, I sort of broke it up on Appendix 7. You can see the numbers on the project page. Phase 1, fire side of the building would be $170,000. And the remaining of the windows on the police side is $160,000. And then there's architectural fees and contingency fees in there. That's why I came out with the $393,690. And the Fire Museum is kicking in a couple of $1,000 of our own money into that. I did recently, you see in here where I also have Vestibule Restoration. That was, well, let me just step back. It's been very difficult with the pandemic to try to get any kind of estimates or quotes or anything. It seems like people are either sick or they don't have the manpower to come out and look. Very, very difficult. I finally was able to secure a Heritage Restoration, gave me a quote for $40,000 to restore the entrance vestibule on the west side of the museum. The main entrance that services the Fire Museum and the Animal Control. It's a wooden structure with a copper roof. And then there was also an additional amount in there for a side window, but we've already restored that window. So it would just be the $40,000. So no matter how the committee would like to look at this, looking at, possibly best case, the $393,690 plus the $40,000, or perhaps the $170 to address the fire side phase 1 plus the 40. And I can certainly do a revised budget. I had prepared one, but I wasn't sure if I dropped it off, if you would receive it in time. I was going to do an updated Appendix 7 and an updated application to reflect the numbers.
Mike, you can email that to me if you want.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. So I don't know what the will of the committee would be, but that's sort of kind of how I'm looking at it. And then if there isn't any funding for the windows on the police side, that would be a project in the future that we would tackle. But we're trying to get an exterior envelope of the building secured. And then along with other interior projects, we already finished the second floor handicap bathroom, work on the first floor handicap bathroom. We've had a security system, 6-camera system donated to the museum. We just had a $25,000 fire alarm system donated to the museum. That's fully installed, being fully installed. They're waiting on parts. And so I've secured fire protection. We'll have the bathroom upgrades, be pretty close to getting the museum open at that point. So
right now you're working on a roof. I think you're just looking at different types of slate to put on, shingles. We did repointing already, right? So the outside, except for the windows, you'd be complete, right?
the outside, the brickwork, we did 2 sides complete, top to bottom, totally repointed and repaired, replaced bricks where needed. The other remaining sides, the south and the east side, were just holes were filled and it made it weather tight, but we didn't do a total restoration top to bottom. But it's keeping the weather out. So
The east side, that's on the park side.
the park side and the side facing the school.
Alrighty. Okay. Does the board have any questions? Raise your hand and I'll. Alex?
Hi, Mike, I was just wondering what the current timeline or the status is of the ongoing roof project from the previous grant. Just if you have like a timetable for that or.
I could shoot that question over to Mike here because we just had several meetings on that. We got another one coming up. We're gonna have one tomorrow, but the snowstorm coming. I'm gonna put it off another week, but we're down to selecting materials. So I'm hoping that project's gonna get moving this summer as soon as the weather warms up.
Sure. So I could speak a little bit about that. So we end up getting our approval, I want to say back in November to proceed. And so, after the holidays, we started in on it because we have a backlog of work. So we did complete our site survey and documenting existing conditions and a drone survey as well. We drafted the existing conditions. We've also started our demolition drawings for the removal of the existing asphalt roof system and some of the details. So the next step is, as Mike just mentioned, we met about 2 weeks ago. And so we're looking at roof materials now. We're having a discussion about, an appropriate roof material for the building. So we're looking at various options and weighing multiple things. So as Mike mentioned, that the meeting we had scheduled for tomorrow to sort of look at these samples that have come into our office, but that's going to be postponed until next Friday. So, and once we have a consensus on the roof material, we'll start to move forward with our, design documents, but we're sort of on hold until we make a decision on what type of material or roof system we're all in agreement on.
Now the windows, you refurbishing them or are they going to be brand new?
So I did quite a bit of research on that, and there were 2 major companies. There was one out of Providence, which is the one that's quoted in the application, and then there was another one that was actually in Swansea. So the way both of those companies work, they both are prevailing wages. They are both historic restoration contractors. The way it works is, in both cases, they have a general contractor who's also, certified, and he'll go in there with a lift and what he needs to do to remove the sash or sashes from the windows, take them off site to the window restoration company that's doing the work. And they will completely dismantle the window, strip it down, repair it, give it 2 coats of primer, new glazing, put the glass back in, replace any broken glass with sort of period looking glass, and 2 coats of top coat paint. And then the sashes get delivered back to the museum. In the meantime, the general contractor that pulls the windows out would obviously have to plywood up the hole. But in the meantime, he would be responsible for painting and repairing the window frames that are in the building, reinstalling the sash once they come back and make them operable, with weights and cords and all that stuff. So it's, you got, the general contractor doing some of the work, and then you get the off-site work being done by a different source, but they're both qualified to do it. So, and we're really looking forward to it. I think it's going to really make the brick pop, because the brick, if you've been by there, it looks really nice. I mean, the west facade and the north facade. I think once that trim, those windows get done, we're thinking about like a dark green paint, which was original to the building. It's going to look nice.
Any other further questions? Richard?
Hey, Mike, great proposal, by the way. I just have a question. So there's actually, so you broke it down into 2 phases. If we were to just do partial funding. With the 2 phases, there's also architectural fees and a contingency of 10%. Any of those price incorporated already in phase 1 and phase 2?
The architectural fees, I believe Mike can correct me. I believe that's to do the whole thing, to do all of the windows. And then the contingency is based on a percentage of the total amount, so the 10%. If you do the math. So whatever the committee decides, I could certainly send the Sandy an updated application for Appendix 7 showing the vestibule. And then if you want, I can break the math down a little bit easier for you to look at, so that, I can break it out. Or if you want to do the windows and the vestibule on the fire side to get the museum open, this is what it'll be. And if you want to go the full thing and do all the windows and the vestibule, this is what it'll be.
Okay, I think that would be helpful if the committee was to receive what the architectural fees would be if it was in 2 phases, because that'll determine the exact number of funding. So that incorporated with, let's say with phase 1, it's 170,000, then it'll be more than 170.
Yeah, I don't know that I would see, to be quite honest, a significant reduction in our fee. And I'll say the reason why is that we are not doing the physical, repair work or installation work. So as from a design standpoint, when we draw, a typical window types, and there are multiple window types, whether it's 1 or 3, it really doesn't matter for our standpoint. And as far as, the bidding part of it and the construction administration part of it, the CA piece of it, construction administration, that's probably where it might reduce slightly. But as far as the submittal reviews that we go through, the process of, interacting with the contractors, that really doesn't change a whole lot. So it may be some on the CA or the construction administration side, right? Because it's probably going to be fewer site visits if we're only doing, one portion of the building versus the entire building. So, but we could look at that.
Right. I understand. I just wanted to just clarify it. So.
Yeah, no, it's a good point.
Thank you.
Any other further questions?
I just wanted to add the vestibule. Once that gets restored, that's going to have to be pulled apart basically and rebuilt with historic appropriate materials where needed. Some of the wood is rotted, but the thing is in danger of collapsing right now, so you can't just slap some paint on and call it done. So that's why that price is pretty high on that one. But again, that's a very historic feature for the front of that building. The Flint Fire Station on Pleasant Street had one, and Freedom Street Station also had one.
Alex, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, on your timeline for the project, I know it's understandably kind of loose, but I was just wondering if you were envisioning this project, should the grant be awarded, progressing concurrently with the roof project? Are you kind of planning on that, or if that happens, would it impact one project adversely?
I don't think so. If, if they were to happen separately, I don't see that one would adversely affect, one over the other, quite honestly.
What I understand it is the general contractor, like I mentioned, he'll bring a lift on site, and so he'll be pretty mobile to work around the roofing contractors. If need be, he could work on the side they're not on and things like that.
The actual repair work, the majority of it is going to happen off-site. They're going to take it back to their shop and do the restoration there. We'll do an inspection, of the work before they bring it back to the site. Just as we would typically go to, the contractor's shop to inspection, to do an inspection first. But no, I don't see that would conflict with a schedule for the roof project.
Any other further questions? All right, Mike, thanks for telling us about your project.
Committee members, appreciate the time.
Thank you.
All right, next up is Antioch School Exterior Restoration Phase 1 for store $234,878. We have Diane Carrere, Vice Principal, with us tonight, and that's located on Rock Street. Diane, would you like to tell us about the project?
Hi, nice to meet you all. Our project, we're doing it in 2 phases. Our main goal is to have our portico put back. It had to be demolished, I'd say a good 17, 18 years ago. Termite damage, electrical, water damage. So it was taken down. We are noticing when we started talking about putting the portico back, we started noticing, obviously we need our siding replaced or repaired. But when Mike came by with his drones, he also noticed some chimney damage that needs to be replaced. Window wood sidings are starting to rot, especially on the 3rd floor. So he kind of, when we sat down and talked about putting it in 2 phases, first getting the building up to code in that sense, and then the second phase being putting our portico in. The school's been there since 1978. I've been there for 22 years now. Mr. Frost, our principal, who's also here, has been at the school for 21 years. We are a private, non-denominational. We are an advanced curriculum school. And our reputation has been, we are located in the Highlands, and people know that. We're a small, home-like environment. Our students thrive with that. Our classroom sizes do not exceed 12. Unfortunately, the last couple of years, due to COVID, our numbers have been down, so we haven't been able to do any repairs whatsoever. But in the past, what we do is we budget, we put things together, and we take it from there. When we replace the backyard, we did our fencing in the back, we do a wall retainer in the back. Electrical needed to be upgraded a few years back. Our roof, things of that nature, windows. So we're hoping to take the initiative and start on this project, only because our fear is if we wait too long, things start to deteriorate even more. The more you touch, the more you find, that type of thing. We did send pictures of the different locations of the chimney and the siding and the windowsills and things of that nature. And we did have old pictures of the portico before it was torn down in the packet also. I don't know if Mike wanted to add anything else.
I would like to say a few things, if I could. Would it be possible to share my screen as I did at the last meeting? Okay. So to Diane's point, this is a photo that was taken about, what, 20 years or so ago, Diane?
Yeah, about 20.
Of that portico that we had talked about. And we did talk about this at the last meeting, the initial meeting, the eligibility application. So really the first project that the school wanted to take on was to recreate this, but my feeling was that the rest of the building is in substantial need of restoration, meaning the siding and some of the windows as well. So what we'd love to see happen is to sort of look at the building in its entirety first, and then at a later date come back, you know, and look at recreating the portico. I gotta say, I've got a few photographs here. Again, some were included in the application, but they have dozens of photos and a lot of close-up shots, detail shots that I think we can do a faithful recreation. But just to be clear, this is not what we're submitting for right now at this time. So, you know, a lot of the detail work, we can get some measurements based off of these photos, I think pretty accurately. So, and to Diane's point, the roof was replaced, I want to say about 5 years or so ago. Is that correct? 5 or 6 years ago, maybe now?
2018.
Yeah, okay. So it's recent. So we're not looking to do anything with the roof. There is some minor repointing that would need to be done. A lot of the original details, which by the way, the house was constructed in 1895. It is on the Fall River Register of Historic Places, as well as the National, as part of the Highlands Historic District. So the details, for the most part, some of them are still there, and we want to make sure that they stay there. So some of these can be restored through a consolidation process, which we've done before. And also there's some areas here on the south side which have been vinyled over. We'd like to remove that and bring it back to, you know, a wood shingle siding type of a finish. And so, you know, some additional details, which I think we can replicate. This is the east side. So we think we can, you know, replicate these pretty faithfully on the west side, where it's deteriorated substantially. So, and as far as the rest of the building, as I see here, there's some repointing that needs to be done. Some of the vegetation that's within the mortar joints that will be removed, the masonry cleaned and repointed accordingly. Most of the brick units are in good shape, so I don't think we really need to do much in the way of brick replacement. However, you know, if need be, we can do that as try to get as close a match as we can to the original. So fortunately, some of the granite areas where the porte-cochere were, you can see the outline of those, and so we've got a good sense of where they were, and the dimensions of those we've already taken, so we could recreate those at a later date possibly. So that's essentially the project. It's an exterior restoration of the building. And so that's sort of the level of the deterioration of the siding. So I would like to mention too that the school is a nonprofit. I know that was mentioned in the application, but just so everyone is aware of that as well.
Now, this is the Antioch, do they own the building?
I'm sorry, John?
Do they own the building?
Yes, the parents are not, correct.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Alrighty, so a deed restriction would be no problem?
Not at all.
Okay, alrighty. Does the board have any questions? I don't see everybody because the picture up on the screen. So if anyone has any questions, just go ahead and ask.
I've got a couple of questions, John.
Okay, go ahead, John.
Mike, on the couple of things on the I noticed that you said the granite was missing. Is that part of what's going to be replicated, or is that stored somewhere for the portico?
It's not it's not stored somewhere. The granite that is there, okay, would remain. Whatever's left over would remain. So what we'd like to see happen as part of the phase 2 project is to recreate that portico share, which would be also the base of the foundation system. So, but I just want to make sure it's clear. We didn't consider it as part of this phase. I just really felt that, or we really felt that the main building is really the priority, and to do, something as far as a recreation of that portico share while everything else is sort of deteriorating, that really was where the main priority should be. While those original details are still there and still present, we thought it was best to save those as best we can and preserve them.
Has any of the any portion of the building dormers or the side, either any side, have they been reshingled at all, or is that all the original shingles? Because they all look like white cedars.
Yeah, they do. And I know some areas have been vinyled over. I don't know, how old they actually are. My guess is at some point they were removed in some sense.
Yeah, I believe when they painted, they did replace some that were either missing or totally deteriorated. But some of it is still some of the older. I believe on the second floor, not the third floor, the dormers, some of them, they had to replace a lot of the shingles because that was totally, there was no shingles at one point. But that was back in 2000, 2001, when I first started. They were trying to paint and replace gradually, and that was all done through families at that point. So it really hasn't been touched since.
Michael, is your intent to go back with white cedars, red cedars? What are we looking at?
It would go back to a cedar shingle, siding, is what the intent. I think we need to go back to and look at some of the historic photos that we've been able to find. There's some too that we found that are on the scholarship calendar that we were looking at as well. So I think we need to spend some time actually doing some design work. What we have done for the school is we've done a complete survey of the building. We've measured everything. We've drafted all the exterior elevations. So that piece of it we've done for them already. So they're sort of a bit ahead in that sense. So
have the windows been redone?
They
The
were.
windows were replaced back in 2016. It was like a 2-year. And then not the original.
And you said you
windows.
were gonna survey the brickwork, because I know on your slide on the one chimney we had a little plant growing there. I don't know if that was.
Yeah, so some of that will have to come out, and some repointing. We're not seeing any shifting in the masonry, which is good. We're not seeing any, major brick replacement that's needed. It's just some repointing that we're seeing, but it's not significant at this point, at least from what we could see from the drone survey. So, yeah.
How about the foundation where the spray foam has been added?
Yeah. That's something we got to look at as well. So
I didn't know that was historical or not.
No. Right.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions? All righty. Diane, thanks for presenting your project.
No, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is the Dr. Fisk House. Historic, $190,000. We have Jim Sewell here, and that's
John.
located in Pine Street.
John, the Art
Oh, whoa.
Association's next.
Sorry about that, my eyesight here. It's the Greater Fall River Art Association on East Elevation Restoration for $283,140. We have Donna. That's located on Belmont Street. You'd like to tell us about your project? You're muted.
Dana, you're muted.
All right, am I okay now?
You're okay now.
Okay, thank you. I'm the president of the Greater Fall River Art Association, and I have Ronald Gagnon with me, and he is the chairman of the House Committee for this organization. And I know Mike Keene is on this call too. What we're looking at doing, the Charles Mariner Cole House is home to the Greater Fall River Art Association. It's at 80 Belmont, and the house was built in 1904. And Charles Mariner Cole was a salvage seaman, and I have included in the packet all of the history that his great-grandson has put together for, as part of his genealogy. But he came up and gave a wonderful talk about his family and how he himself has ties to this community. He's related to the Hargraves, who had the big mills here in town. He's also related to the McLeans. And the Coles that are Charles Mariner Cole are part of the Coles associated with the Cole River and the Coles over in Tuisset. So he has a huge connection to this city. And he presented us with a wonderful documentation of the history of this house. This house, what we're looking to do is the front porch is in dire need of renovation. It's the main entrance to this building. The porch, the columns, the granite, all are suffering from age. There's a lot of water damage. We had some bug damage, which we have contracted out to have, like the Big Blue Bug comes and does their thing for us. So we're looking to have the front porch done and have the front. That's what you first see when you walk into our building, is this beautiful front porch. We have beautiful art exhibits in the summertime out on the porch. People come walking by, come up and take a look, then they go inside the historic building itself. The other part that we'd like to do is to shift the fire escape from the front to the back of the house or some other location on the house. I know Mike can probably talk a little more about where that might get shifted, but it doesn't add anything wonderful to the architecture of the house. The Art Association has been in the city since 1957. We have owned this house. It was gifted to us. We own it outright in 1969. So we've been a part of the community for a long time. We not only have galleries inside the building that we show monthly art shows, we are also home to 10 artists in residence. We are a welcoming and open community that people can come and feel safe pursuing their passions of whatever their art happens to be. We also conduct classes. We have been filling our classes. It seems that COVID has brought out all the artists in the city and in the surrounding communities. So our kids' classes are filling rapidly, our adult classes are filling rapidly, and our specialty classes are taking off as well. So we are so excited about all of that. But that all gets housed inside this beautiful building. The other thing that the city is that the organization is honored to have is we have 40 pieces of works progress art that are on permanent display here in the building. It's in our grand staircase. The Smithsonian Institution has granted us permission to have these on permanent display, hanging where people can see them and enjoy them. And they are a part of history that a lot of them have been lost. You know, these were not artists who actually, save for Jackson Pollitt or John Singer Sargent. Most of these artists were just working artists like we have in the building right now. And they produced a lot of art. Franklin Roosevelt thought that they should be paid for their art, and that art should be displayed prominently in public buildings. So that's how artists made their money during the Depression. So we are a small organization, but we have a lot of really wonderful volunteers who love this house. And we recognize that we, as a group of volunteers, are limited as to the things we can do. I mean, we can't, to be honest, we can't go out and put a porch on, but we can certainly maintain what we do, and we have done so. Our main galleries, our main floor are all redone. The wood, the plaster walls, the bookcases, the fireplaces, the ceilings, all done. We finished the second floor the same way, and we're working on the third floor. We're working on the studios, that doing renovations to them so that they can all be rented out. We have a few empty studios at this time. When an artist moves out, we do the renovation at that time so that we can make each studio something that somebody wants to come in and do. And we are looking for some help in order to maintain this beautiful home. We also have some of the most amazing stained glass windows in this building, which we are honored to have. Our window system itself in the building is all ropes and pulleys. There are some exterior storm windows that have been done, but for the interior, they're all ropes and pulleys, and some of those cathedral glasses are still the wavy glass of the time period. We have in the building, Mrs. Mariner, Mrs. Nellie Mae Cole was an artist, and we have in our building some of her artwork. She painted the beautiful fireplace in one of our studios, and she also painted the tiles in the bathroom. So her work graces our building too. And you know, we're raising money to do these things. We have a fundraiser that is an ongoing effort on our part called the Spindles and Columns. We've raised $2,500, $3,000 for that right now, and we just had an art auction to benefit our capital fund to the tune of $2,500. So, you know, even in the middle of COVID, when we're struggling mightily to get funding, we're still finding ways to raise money, but we could certainly use some of the help from the community preservation group. Mike, do you want to add anything?
Mike, on the can I just ask the question on the fire escapes? Or is that going to meet code when you move them? I guess you're going to check that out.
Yeah, do you mind if I just share my screen with you? I can just call up a few photos just so everyone can see, what is it we're talking about.
Thank you, Mike.
Sure. So the fire escape that Dana mentioned, again, this is what we're proposing is a restoration of the east facade, which is really the public facade of the Art Association. So yes, John, to answer your question, for us, to fully restore this, to start with the east elevation and still have that fire escape there is an eyesore. So we've got to look at code, right, and see where we might be able to relocate it. But I will say that just a block or two away on Highland Avenue, there was an historic house that we restored maybe 2 or 3 years ago now. And it was a complete restoration of the building, and we relocated the fire escape, which was on the public side, the Highland Avenue side, to one of the side elevations. But it just means we need to look at the egress for that upper floor and find a suitable location, and of course review with the city inspectors first. So, but that is the goal. That's part of that. We did include an allowance for relocating that based on the project that we did just a few blocks away. And I can just cycle through some other photos too. Feel free if anyone has any questions.
I do know you maintain the inside of the building. It was very nice. I've only been on the first floor, and the stairway case is very pretty.
Thank
Does the
you.
board have any, does the board have any questions? John?
Just a curious question. Was there a widow watch on there by any chance, Mike? At one time?
No.
I don't know. That's a good
I see a
question.
flat-
So,
flat tops on the roof. Usually, if you
Yes.
look at the red house on the side, there's usually widow watches up there.
right,
I'm just
right.
curious.
I don't think so.
Are you offering to throw that in too, John?
I know, right?
Not a widow watch.
Oh, okay. All right. I just thought I'd ask. So no, so where we are right now with, so we put our proposal together, but we've done, you know, and again, these are all volunteer organizations, the nonprofit organizations, you know, the Fire Museum, Antioch, and this, you know, nonprofit. So we were sensitive to that. So we've gone in here as well and surveyed the existing conditions, and we've drafted the existing conditions. So the next step really for us is to really start to get into the historic research of the property. So there could have been at one point, but I think we just need to take a look at that, and maybe that could be something, you know, as a future project, right? We're just looking at just asking for the east elevation, because that's the one that we feel is in the most need of restoration. So, but just to kind of cycle through a few photos that I think most are in, you know, the package or the application that went to you. So there would be a need for masonry restoration, some repointing where some of the granite foundation has shifted a bit. As Dana mentioned, the columns as well. So they've split, they're deteriorating. Just kind of go quickly through this for you, but I think this is even opened up quite a bit more since we took this photo. This, I think, was probably last summer sometime when we took it, but it's deteriorated even further. So, so we're sort of looking for assistance with, you know, all of the care that the association has taken with the interior, and there's been a lot of, you know, hours that have been put into this to take care of the interior, but this is just something that's beyond their capabilities to do, and it's sad to see, you know, this be this way, you know. But I can tell you, it's not for a lack of effort on their part, or, you know, or trying to fundraise.
So I see you're going to try and save some of the spindles on the porch.
Yeah, wherever we can, you know, it's going to be looking at trying to save what we can, you know, and some of it we won't be able to, unfortunately, but, you know, we'll get as close as we can to a recreation of what's there.
You could use one in September.
So I'll close out of the photos if anyone else has any other questions.
Any more questions?
Dana?
Go ahead.
Yep, Dana, can I just get your last name for the minutes?
Yes, my last name is Barnes, Barnes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ready. Well, thank you for the presentation tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, moving on to the next one. Is the Dr. Fisk House, historic for $190,000. Jim Sewell's here from Forest Preservation Society. That's located on Pine Street. Jim, you want to tell us what you're doing tonight? Or Alex, you had a question?
Can I just say I'm on the board of directors of the Preservation Society, so I'm going to recuse myself. I'll just shut off my computer screen for you all.
Okay.
I'm really glad that Alex recused himself and shut his screen off, because he's a big problem. You know, we were at every meeting. He's just so annoying. He's a big problem. So most of you probably are very familiar with the building, but in brief, I want to say that I think you know about the historical background on the building. CPA has been very supportive of our work on this house. We have had extra monies for the projects, including grants from Bristol County Savings Bank, at Bay Coast Bank, We financed some of it ourselves, $100,000 or so. And we completed a lot of work. This application, what I did was, actually I talked to John Brandt last year about how some of the projects like ours, we come back and year after year, we're asking for some more money. And so I kind of rethought the way I sent my application this year. What I did this year was I put all of the projects that I thought were CPA appropriate for this house. There's a bunch of other work that this house wants and needs, but this is the scope that I think, there's nothing else I would be coming back to the CPA for. What's here is everything. And that way, you know what we're looking at possibly from the CPA. That being said, I did separate it on the application into 3 phases. And clearly, definitely the priority for us is the roof. We had it surveyed. They couldn't tell how old it was. They figured it was more than 40 years old. We do have active leaks, although it looks amazingly good for 40 years old, but it is leaking. And what we want to do, because the roof is part of the architectural style and historical component of the house, we want to do it in a faux slate. We consulted with an area architect about what the correct product was, whether it would have been cedar or slate, and because of the age 1830s, it really could have been either way. The problem with going with real slate would be that we'd probably have to reinforce the rafters, which would be a much bigger project. But the faux slates, some of the good faux slates, they definitely seem to qualify under Secretary of Interior standards. I have like a couple of the styles here. They're really cool. They have like a rubber, they're bendable. And so they're not like the early plastic ones that break and crack. And our biggest problem right now, to be honest with you, is we had 2 estimates and they were way far apart. One was in the 60s and one was in the 90s. And we are waiting for 2 more estimates to come in. They're guys I talked to. One of the guys has done a couple of preservation roofs for Whale. And so I just think that because our estimates are so far apart, I would feel a lot better having some more estimates to make sure that we're in the right ballpark and everything is being considered, including the products that we're looking for.
What's on the roof now, Jim? Just regular shingles?
Regular asphalt.
Okay. Then you're going to replacing some clapboard on the side.
Yeah, the west elevation is weird. I don't know what happened to it, but anyone can drive by or walk by and look and see that there was some type of damage at some point in time, and somebody who was probably actively drinking slapped up new clapboard, and they're all like wibbly wobbly, and they're in poor shape. The rest of the house is actually not bad. It's going to need to be painted soon, but the west side is so bizarre, it really needs to be replaced.
Does the board have any questions? All right, Jim. You explained everything pretty well.
You guys made my night easy. Thank you.
I'm glad you put everything in this year.
Thank you.
And I mean, the buildings, I mean, to me, that's what CPA is seeing that building done. I mean, it's going to be like the Lafayette House. And that's one of the reasons I like to see a complete project.
I know.
It really pops out.
Yeah, Lafayette Durfee looks fantastic. So we would like to look as good as that, although it has come a long way. And the portico, which you guys paid for, was completed last month, and it came out fantastic.
Yes, yeah, it is.
The front windows and shutters are going to be installed within the next 2 months also. And so please feel free to drive by. They're gonna look phenomenal.
Thanks. Thanks for the presentation.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Do we have any new business?
John,
yes.
can I just say a couple of things?
Sure.
Just a couple of dates for the committee. The deliberation meeting is going to be March 24th, and then the meeting to vote to recommend to the council is March 31st. Okay, those dates have been booked for these two meetings. If anybody needs any further information from any of the projects, this is the time to get it so that you can bring it to the deliberation meetings. So all the committee members can gather that same information. Just send it to me and I'll make sure that I get it out to everybody. Jim, seeing that you're still on the call, when you get your other two quotes, just email them to me and then I'll forward them on to the committee. As I get information from any of the projects, I'll get the website and the Boston Globe article from Brad Paul. I'll forward it to all of you. And then anything else that you all think you need, let me know and I'll try to get it from the projects and forward it to all of you. But feel free to go and call your applicants and visit the sites and gather as much information as you can before the meeting for the 24th.
Also, we did have a meeting with Ed, the treasurer, and Seth, the administrative assistant for the mayor, which was pretty good. We talked about bonding. So if we have a few projects, we want to look at that. We can use that as our option. They were up for that. So other than that, I think we're.
And just one thing, John mentioned, we did meet with the treasurer and you can bundle your bonding projects. So if you have more than one projects this year and you want to bundle them in a bond, I'm going to be working very, very closely with the treasurer so that he'll know what projects the committee wants to bond if you decide you do want to bond this year. It's time sensitive because they go out to bond a certain time every year to get the best rates. So when you're deliberating and when you're voting this year, think about that. Okay, so we want to try to get through our process by the end of April to try to get this to the city council so we can get the best rate for bonding when the city goes out to bond as well. Again, if you decide you want to bond, and do remember you can bundle your projects for a bond.
Now we have an estimate on the 24th, how much we have to spend.
Whoops, hang on, I just, okay, can you hear me? I don't know what button I pressed. Okay, yes, I will be tied to the auditor and the treasurer from now until you vote. So when you come to your meeting, the 31st, I will know exactly what you have that day to spend on your projects this year. Okay, so I'll be getting updates from her on literally a weekly basis. I'll email her and get updates on how much money is in there.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Oh.
And did we have any update on the account at the Registry of Deeds?
I need an invoice for them so that I can pay them. I haven't gotten an invoice from them to pay them yet.
Was someone from finance contacting them?
All they got to do is send me an invoice and I can do a bill schedule and get them a check. And then they can just put those $100 towards all those deeds that are getting recorded.
Been over a year since I filed the emergency application.
I know, and they've got to get me an invoice. Someone's got to contact them to send me an invoice so that I can give them that money.
Alrighty. Well, I guess on new business too, just to let you know, I did talk to Stuart about the bells. I asked him about the question about the stands that hold the bells. And his thing was that it's kind of left up to us. He said, if we restore the bells and we don't do the stand, he goes, what good is restoring the bells? So he goes, that would be up to our local board to okay that. So that could fall into, which I did call Kristen, and she's gonna, Caitlin, she's gonna get us an estimate to see how much to reconstruct the stages. And then on the fire station, I asked him about the AVAC system, and he said to properly keep the building at a certain temperature and humidity, that we could include that because of historic building. So keep that in mind when we come to deliberation. That's all I have.
I just want to note that John just said my name correctly, but only when he was referring to someone else.
It happens once in a while.
I know.
All righty. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second,
Roll call vote. John?
yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Caroline?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
Yes for me. So meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.